World of Warcraft is a wonderful game, when you actually got something to do that doesn't involve kissing men in Orgrimmar. Gas stations, people, go to the proper place like the rest of us! You see, the problem with a theme park MMO like WoW is that yes, every time a raid comes out, there's a ton of new stuff to cover, everybody's completely hyped and there is not enough time to talk about it all at the same time. But when Blizzard has to delay a project for 6 months because human resources is CC hypnoing the developers or whatever the heck they do nowadays to waste the time of 100 people team, that's when World of Warcraft has the potential to be one of the most desolate games in existence. There is not a lot to do in the game once you get the gear from that raid. And across history, Blizzard has managed to kill several expansions by doing the exact same thing the American government does to veterans with chronic health issues: abandoning you. These are the worst content droughts in Warcraft history. Number 1 is gonna be arguably the first content drought in World of Warcraft, and let me tell you something that you figured out by now. We had it really good back then and we never really appreciated it, because what at the time was considered to be a content drought was really baby numbers compared to what Ion Hazzikostas did when running the game. And that first content drought is going to be the Burning Crusade, the Sunwell tier. Patch 2.4 was actually very well packed with content. The Isle of Quel'Danas was the first big push for a daily quest hub, something that almost every major patch in retail nowadays has, ever since Rato the Lich King really. And by the time Cataclysm kicked in, daily chores became a staple of your life, like doing the dishes or mowing the lawn. I just love retail, it is such a great game. It wasn't that bad back in TBC, of course. I'm just messing with you, because the Shattered Sun Offensive was just a supplementary grind for people to catch up. It didn't have a lot of best in slot items at all. It had a couple optional profession recipes and blues that were not very good too. So for the most part, if you were raiding already, you didn't have to do it. A lot of people did it because they were a great way to get gold, but they were very different from the mandatory grind dailies that we got nowadays that you need to do to be best in slot, so people remember it very fondly. Alongside came a new dungeon, the Magister's Terrace, a dungeon with a bunch of cool trinkets for a couple classes, and the last boss is Kael'thas. Again? Yes, but he turned into Asmongold now, so it's totally different. Of course, the main feature of 2.4, the thing we're gonna talk about, it was the Sunwell. An entirely new raid with a bunch of cool bosses that nobody cared about because we already killed Illidan. And that's a team you're gonna see a couple more times in the history of WoW. Probably not a great move to drop a raid after you kill the last big boss of the expansion. You should probably flip those two over. I think if you put Sunwell before Black Temple, nobody would have complained, but maybe that's just me. But otherwise, it was a really good tier. The first tier where melees actually started pumping really hard because TBC was not a very good expansion for melee, let me break that to you. But that's another big reason that people actually really liked the Sunwell. Also, it had the legendary bow Toridal Star's Fury. It became an artifact in Legion. It has nothing to do with anything, but I thought it was pretty neat. Altogether, this patch ran from March 25th, 2008 to October 14th, 2008. Not including some minor bug fixes, of course, because the Sunwell didn't run right at all when it came out. That's 203 days in a single tier, or 7 months. Which is a long time, but as you're gonna see, that's baby numbers compared to everything else we're gonna talk about. I think another thing that mitigated the problem of the content drought, the reason that a lot of people do not remember this as a content drought itself, is that back in TBC, the previous tiers were relevant. So yes, you are doing Sunwell, but you still gotta do SSC, you still gotta do TK. It's not like in retail after Ulduar when TOC came out, where nothing you did from the previous tier mattered because the gear was so much higher up that you were basically resetting your item level every tier. So you got a lot of bang for your buck in a way. You had a lot of raiding to do if you wanted to. I think the old design from Classic WoW was a lot better suited for surviving a content drought, which is ironic because content droughts only got longer and longer as time went on, and this design was essentially abandoned by the end of Rato the Lich King. Oh right, Rato the Lich King, how could I forget? Once again, people love tossing Rato the Lich King in to justify the content droughts of modern World of Warcraft, because of course you gotta defend the harmless $70 billion corporation. They are on their last 70 billion, it's like they need your help. We had to do ICC for almost a year, that's right. In the time that it took for the last tier of Rato the Lich King to go through, a woman can make a child in her body, pop it out, and still have like 1 more month to sue me for child support that I'm not gonna pay, in the time that took Blizzard to make a new raid. It's not even a joke. I heard this story twice before from different guys, that they got their wife pregnant during ICC and they had their kid before ICC ended. That's a true story I heard before. It's crazy how, as WoW players talking to each other, you use raids as a time frame. I do it a lot over the years, I noticed. It's kinda convenient. You always remember what raid you were doing when back then a couple years ago. And I am gonna tell you that the ICC content drought was not as bad as you might think. First of all, you had 2 lockouts for the raid, which stretched out the progression a little bit. You had to build a 10-man team and a 25-man team, and then you had to get 5 people and another 5 people because it was 25-man team instead of 20. That didn't make a lot of sense. They changed their mind on that afterwards. And also I think Heroic Lich King was the perfect balance between hard enough that it takes a long time of progression to kill, but also easy enough that most guilds could think, well, if we really try and we progress for a while, we're gonna kill it eventually, so we might as well do it. It's a very hard balance to strike. Usually they go either too hard or too easy, and people either kill it too fast and the raid tier is over very soon, or people see it's too hard and don't even try, which is the modern retail debacle. That's why most people do not do mythic raids. Whether this is best for the game, that's a different question. I am not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, but as far as extending progression and stretching out a tier goes, Lich King Heroic was probably the perfect boss. The actual gap from ICC to Kata pre-patch was about 10 months, 308 days to be exact, which is still a whole freaking long time, not gonna lie, of course. And slapping Robbie Sanctum does not mean it got like a refresh. It's a single boss that, let's be honest here, it doesn't count. And at the time people said, oh man, this is the worst he's ever gonna get. 308 days, what are they thinking? It is just like the 20 low-level employees that got laid off from Cantor Fitzgerald the 7th of September of 2001, you know? They also thought, oh, this is the worst it's gonna get, man. How could I be so unlucky? But no, guys. World of Warcraft was gonna get hit by something much, much worse. And before I bring up the real big ones, I would like to do some honorable mentions here, because I think you're gonna see something that happened to you too, and it's my perception of time over the years. It kinda worked, because I remember some content droughts being a lot longer than others, and looking at the dates, it's actually not the case. For example, I remember Dragon Soul being particularly bad. Even though nobody guesses it's number 1, most people would say it was top 2 or top 3. Most people really remember that one as a content drought, but it's not even close. It was actually just, quote unquote, 9 months. Almost on the clock, 273 days. So if you were a fan of stabbing dragons on the toes, I guess you got a lot of bang for your buck. Personally, I prefer the part where you pop the pimples out of his back. That was top of the line gameplay. Definitely worth spending an entire expansion teasing this fight. Just for comparison, the content drought from Legion to BFA was 328. That's almost 11 months right there. Now that's a long one. I've never seen people complain about that. I don't know if it is because nobody was excited about BFA. Maybe that's why ICC didn't feel so long either. I don't know. But without further bone apple tea, let's talk about the worst content droughts of World of Warcraft history, because they came in quick succession and they are part of the same storyline. Not only that, they also played a pretty significant role in why we got classic WoW nowadays, and also Asmongold's meteoric rise to fame. I am not even kidding. We are of course talking about Siege of Orgrimmar, the last raid of Mist of Pandaria, and Warlords of Draenor, which are part of all the same plot point of Metzen deciding that Garrosh needs to die because he couldn't take that people like Garrosh more than Green Jesus. For all you that think Metzen is gonna save the lore of the game now that he's back, the lore that he himself destroyed, you are more delusional than a Latin American that believes in democracy. It's not gonna happen. We tried it. It's not gonna work. Siege of Orgrimmar was the last raid of Mists of Pandaria. A very difficult raid where some of the bosses had so much HP they were literally breaking the engine For real, the reason that they put so many phases on Garrosh where he goes back to 100 HP is because the actual number of HP that they wanted was longer than you could fit in the code. However, Siege of Orgrimmar is remembered for one thing and one thing only. You see, Warlords of Draenor was getting made by the time Pandaria was running. You always work on the next expansion while the current expansion is on the works, right? But Warlords of Draenor was getting stuck in development hell. The things were not going fine. Imagine you make an expansion about orcs and the orc clans just after the Warcraft movie came out, so everybody was very hyped about orcs. And then one executive looks at all the 4 tiers of orc raids and the orc zones and he goes, "This has too many orcs. You know what you should do? We should throw away $50 million, we should throw away a year of work and cut the map in half and put something else like Burning Legion, you know, like the guys from TBC. Let's put those guys into the game instead." Half of Warlords of Draenor that got made never came out and they made half of it again. And as you can imagine, making half of an expansion takes a long time, so the way they worked it out is the same way Blizzard always works everything out. When they make a mistake, you pay for it. And that meant that Warlords of Draenor was delayed while Pandaria got no content whatsoever. And this raid, Siege of Orgrimmar, it actually lasted 511 days. That's right, it took them 1 year, 4 months and 24 days to get a raid out. That's almost as long as the entirety of Warlords of Draenor, and that's on a single tier. To this day, Siege of Orgrimmar remains the longest running content drought in World of Warcraft history. But, I do not think that's a fair number 1 here. I do not think that's the one that you should remember the most, because honestly I think the next follow-up that we got delayed a year for is even worse. The very reason that Siege of Pandaria lasted more than a year is the same reason that Warlords of Draenor sucked. They got delayed, they ran out of time, and they didn't do half the stuff they were supposed to do. Warlords of Draenor would be remembered as the biggest scam by Blizzard if Overwatch 2 never happened. They kinda stole their thunder. You might be thinking, okay, they made no content for a year, they got this, they must have packed something really good to delay the entire thing a year, right? That's a lot of time. And they packed something really good in Warlords of Draenor, as long as what you mean by really good is just a ripoff of Farmville. What, you don't think that waiting for an imaginary worker to do stuff for you is fun? Maybe you should sit down for this. Warlords of Draenor was not only lackluster in class design and PvP, it had a lot of balance issues on release, but it effectively killed gathering professions, questing, and rendered the entire world useless by the garrison mechanic. It means that you sit on your own fortress and you wait for stuff to happen to you. I know it sounds stupid, but back in 2013 those were all the rage in Facebook, or your mom was playing those games all the time. So of course World of Warcraft wanted to get into the Facebook mom demographic, the very profitable market of the Facebook mom. But sarcasm aside, Warlords of Draenor became very quickly the most hated expansion ever, perhaps only dwarfed recently by BFA. Recollecting all the reasons that made Warlords of Draenor fail would take an entire video, and I don't know if I feel like making that. But what you gotta remember, as I said before, is that when Blizzard makes a mistake, you pay for it. So they did what they do best. They stopped working on Warlords of Draenor, they cancelled on the content, and they tried to move out to the next expansion as fast as possible to salvage the situation, because what is the point of making raid content when you lost all your players because of you're stupid? So when an expansion is dead, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where Blizzard will not work on it because it's dead and there's no content, so people stop playing. Warlords of Draenor was essentially abandoning the game for a year, and I said before that this played a role in classic WoW happening and that's Mongol becoming famous, and those two actually come together. You see, so many people quit retail WoW back then that vanilla private servers that were once just a very niche emulation project that very few people knew about started blowing up because people wanted to play some WoW somewhere and Warlords of Draenor had nothing to do. Nostalrius, of course, was the biggest one of those private servers with about 15 people online at the peak, which is about 3 classic WoW servers. For a little perspective here, it was massive. And of course, we know the story, Blizzard got really upset at them, so they sued them, they got them down. down. They took down the server legally in France, and that created a massive backlash of people getting really mad. The main way of protest was actually that Overwatch was about to come out at the time, and a lot of people canceled their pre-orders, which must have really hurt them. And many people, including the original Vanilla WoW team lead, Mark Kern, they made a petition for Blizzard to release vanilla servers officially. If they are gonna take them down, you might as well give it to us legally. And of course, Asmongold himself, he was present in those protests, and that's what eventually got Blizzard to believe in Classic WoW, and that's why we got Classic WoW today. At the same time, Asmongold, why did he become famous during this time? First of all, let me make clear that before this whole thing, Asmongold was already a very successful streamer. He had like 3,000 viewers, his YouTube channel was very popular. It was not that he was a nobody before this, but if you were to think of the face of World of Warcraft back then, you were probably thinking of somebody like Soda Poppin, something like that. And that's exactly what happened. WoW was so dead that a lot of the big streamers of World of Warcraft moved on from WoW. You had people like Rekful doing variety, you had Soda Poppin becoming one of the biggest variety streamers in the platform, and Asmongold was on a prime position as a guy with a decent amount of viewers to hit the top of the directory. Back then, the Twitch directory sorted all the streams from highest viewers to lowest, so if you had the most viewers, you were number one in the directory. Every time you wanted to check out World of Warcraft on Twitch, you would see Asmongold at the front. He essentially went from a middle tier streamer to the top, the front page of the game overnight. And ironically, by the time that the game recovered, Legion came out and it succeeded, all the new viewers that started coming back to the game, Asmongold was there to soak them up. So in a way, you got Warlords of Draenor to thank for Asmongold. Whether you like that or not, that's up to you. I don't really care. I just thought it was really funny to bring up. And where I was going with this, Warlords of Draenor stopped development and cancelled an entire raid tier, so Hellfire Citadel became their final expansion raid. And it spanned another whopping 1 year and 2 months and 1 week. Which is slightly shorter than Siege of Orgrimmar, fine, yes, but at the same time the entire expansion had 3 raids. You paid $40 for this and you got less value than BFA. Warlords of Draenor remains by far the expansion with the least raiding content. Even BFA, the second worst failure, it got 4 raids. Legion had 5 raids. TBC had 8. Wrath of the Lich King had 9. Fine. Warlords of Draenor did not have the longest content drought in history, but it definitely got the least rain. What is that? The most arid expansion ever? Okay, let's call it that. Screw it. It's going number 1. Fine. I'm gonna tell you what's gonna make you moist. I am now also streaming on Twitch. The stream is gonna be available on both platforms, so make sure to drop a follow or something. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.